No sound.
I forgot to unmute myself. We're still beginners.
No.
We're still beginners.
I forgot to unmute myself.
Oh, so now there's still the feedback.
Still beginner.
No.
Right.
We're still beginners. I forgot to unmute myself.
Oh, so now there's feedback.
Still beginner.
Right. Okay. I just closed Facebook down.
Oh, okay.
And
And
can you find this on Facebook?
I just went to a page and I couldn't, but I've just found it on live. So no one's here yet. It's just us.
Just us. Cool. Well, let's just give it a minute or two and then start chatting, because then chatting about what it is we wanted to share.
While we're waiting, why don't you ran a group last night, didn't you? How did that go?
I ran my first small group gathering meeting, and that was a group of it was open to 12 people. One person wasn't able to show up because they were unwell, and it was I was really nervous, oddly enough, and I've been running large groups for a long time, but there's something, and I've been attending your small group for I don't know how long, a year or something. I have no idea. So I'm used to that format, but not being in the driving seat, as it were. And it was really, really beautiful. And we did the same basic protocol of, gathering. What is lovely is that the sharing, and I think everybody felt this, the sharing at the beginning, just a little introduction, say hello, talk about what's going on for you, what's up at the moment. And then that really starts to build connection, build community. And of course, whatever happens then in the following meditation is based on, or what is spoken about in the initial opening sharing gets woven into the meditation. And what I loved was how different it felt holding the small group compared to holding a large group, which is a bit anonymous. We don't have cameras on. There's a bit of hello and a bit of chat in the a bit of conversation, a bit of written conversation in the chat, but it's not the same, and it makes such a lovely difference. And then after the meditation, we opened up all the cameras and everybody got the opportunity to share again. And it just makes such a difference. And it's really important, I think, that we get or we give ourselves these opportunities to really immerse ourselves in multidimensional community. And I know online, it's what's available to most of us. It would be lovely to have more and more of this in person, and hopefully we can build towards that. But the online stuff is pretty powerful. It really is lovely. I'm really struck by, because as I'm speaking here, I'm sitting in my friend's little house not far from where I live. My internet is down, so I've had to decamp to various places to work. And my friend is a crystal dealer. And there's this extraordinary amethyst. I'm going to turn it around and see if you can see it, because I've got it staring at me. And from this angle, can you see that? It looks just like a snake's head. Can you?
Doesn't it look fantastic?
And it's I'm really getting that energy coming right at me as we're speaking. So the amethyst snakes have joined us in no uncertain terms this morning. So it was very, very beautiful. And something happened last night that sort of took me by surprise. And you work, what are you up to?
I just saw my computer's about to go flat and I'd forgotten to plug it in.
You often work with geometry all the time. You do a lot of work with geometry when you're leading groups and meditations, and I hardly ever do, because geometry just isn't something that I see. But last night, as we were dropping into meditation, I started to see patterns of geometry in the bodies, and I knew these patterns, and it looked like jewelry almost, geometric patterns, and I knew these patterns were belief systems or wounds or well, just patterns that were ready to clear. And it was suggested, and it took me by surprise because that's not how I normally perceive things. And it was suggested that we release the patterns as strands of geometry in our system. And it seemed to work. People commented afterwards how easy that made it to work with wounds. And I thought that's a really significant thing about these times, I think, is that we no longer have to go into the wound. If we come at these things from a higher dimension, it becomes very easy to lift them out of our system without getting entangled in all of the emotional, having to revisit the experience, all of that stuff. And I think, of course, we've known that for a long time. I've never seen it like this, where literally strands of geometric patterning, I think it was wounding, it was ancestral stuff. You can imagine how we would be coded into our ancestral patterning through patterns of geometry. Everything is a fractal, and everything is a pattern at some level. And this was the first time I've seen it in quite that way. So that was a really beautiful experience. And what struck me was that afterwards people did share and say, "Oh wow, that made it much, much easier to connect with the pattern and to let it go." So yeah, that was a
So
great experience.
if you think about a wound, and so we've had all these thoughts and beliefs and patterns and behaviors and addictions and actions or whatever, they create light filaments. And so they actually end up creating a structure.
Yeah.
And then the cells and everything get trapped around the structure and create a blockage. So yeah, we can simplify anything, down to geometry, down to a color, down to symbol. It doesn't matter. And yeah, the great thing about doing that, as you know, is it bypasses the stories, and we're dealing directly with the energy, an old structure of energy or an old energy complex or whatever. So yeah, anything we can simplify down better.
It just made
Brilliant.
it
It
so
sounds cool.
smooth. Yeah, it was great. It made it so smooth to lift these patterns out. And I always used to see the stories, when I was connecting with somebody to do energy work, the story would just unfold as you connected with the pattern. And I always see structures in and around people of, what we create, because our thoughts are a very powerful creative force. So we do literally have these structures littered around our energy fields. Often I've seen where people in childhood focused maybe on a Disney movie or a Disney story, and the story of Cinderella or that archetype really imprints itself. And then there's the structure. There's the structure that guides the energy of our life because it's still encoded. We really gave ourselves to that story and brought it in. And there's all sorts of co-creation and connection with those stories, the deep archetypal patterns. But often it will show up as that archetypal image from a Disney movie, and people are really surprised when I say, "Oh, did you used to watch Cinderella a lot?" And it was like, oh. and then we just dismantle the archetype because it's ready to fall away. So I've always seen patterns and structures. I've just never seen it like this before. So how was your week?
How was my week? I think, I think what we're doing at the moment is absolutely extraordinary. I've never had a week like it. The stuff that I've been given jobs to do every day. And I think about 3 or 4 days ago, I had to rewrite a script. So I picked a person that, that I had a resistance to, and rewrote the script of the whole history using golden filaments of light and bringing that through the heart and looking at the history and then going for a bird's eye view, so looking from a higher perspective and seeing the real story, the energy that was going on rather than the stories. And so that was the first part. And then I think the next day my masculine and my feminine merged together as one, which was absolutely extraordinary. And I think this is happening around the planet at the moment. So I think I'm going to do a little bit on like the end meditation around this, bringing our masculine and feminine together and inviting them to merge. What's that doing? I think uh, when that happened to me, I was aware of entering the space of unknown, like pretty much immediately, and as well as flow. So it's only been a couple of days. I'm not well, yeah, there are all these other miracles, all these things lining up. Um, I can look back across my whole past now. And I only noticed this morning, and everything that I look back on has that bird's eye view perspective. It's I can't see anything was wrong in any of the past.
Yeah.
So there's something about the masculine and feminine that comes together that changes our whole perspective. And I think it's moving into that Trinity energy. I feel like once that mother and father, that masculine, feminine principles are set up within us, then the next thing that's going to happen is we're going to realize that we are the golden child. And those three parts working together, communicating together, working as a Trinity energy rather than duality. This is what's going on this week, I feel.
And it seems that when those two aspects come together, and I was born into a household where my parents physically fought. It was physically very violent. And I believe my job as a child was to keep them as far apart as possible, and that was the job I gave myself, was to keep the masculine and feminine apart. And it made me laugh when I realized that, and the symbolism of that. And the coming together, I think it enables us to see our life through the eyes of wholeness rather than separation. And so you get that bird's eye because you're no longer caught up in the victim perspective, and you're not caught up in the wounding. You're seeing everything and the perfection of everything, huh?
Yeah, so when that happened to me, David, it was more than that. Once it finished, I was aware that I was stepping into the unknown, that I'd actually entered that space and more familiar with the flow. But from there, it invited me, or I just knew to allow every other attachment to my own teachings, my own writings, to anything that I think that is mine, any parts of my identity, I watched all them drop away as well. And they're explaining to me, if you hang on to, say, I created this thing called 0 point. If you hang on to that, then you're going to prevent yourself from stretching that out. And they went on to say, we've got to start putting this stuff out more and more and more. And a lot of free stuff, as much free stuff as they can. Obviously, we need to earn an income as well. So you might do that out of your meditation groups or your smaller groups or something like that. But if there's any stuff coming in, to just continue flowing it out. By flowing it out, we're actually saying yes, and we're stepping onto that path of flow, if that makes sense. But yeah, there's been a whole strip away. Once that masculine, feminine came in, and the separation was neutralized within self, and we aligned with our own oneness, all these other incredible things are just coming online.
That's glorious, isn't it? That's beautiful. It's happened for me. Some years ago, I was introduced it's a long story and I won't go into it now, but to an internal river of gold. And I was pushed into this by my guides over a long meditation and held there for hours, so that I really became familiar with this place. It was deep inside. And I was told in that experience that this is your internal river of gold. It's the place that sustenance and flow exists within, that mankind has separated himself out from this and searches for gold on the outside, but actually it's on the inside. And then it came back again, very forcibly last week, I think. And since then, I've been very much experiencing this internal river of gold. And in essence, it's a timeline. It's a timeline of plenty, a timeline of abundance, a timeline of richness, a timeline where separation isn't the norm, because you're not separate from what it is we think we need. It's, so if we can imagine, and I think it can be difficult, when lack is being pushed on the planet now, and everybody is feeling the thing about, prices rising, and so there's a lot of fear and anxiety around money. It's really being amplified. Imagine settling into that internal river of gold that is a natural state for all of us, and allowing that to flood you and fill you up. And I think that raises our frequency and makes literally our energy field a more attractive force. So we literally draw to us what we need. It becomes easier to manifest in our lives simply because we're feeling sustained from the inside, rather than desperate and needy and wanting to grab stuff from the outside. So it's a really lovely experience, and I think part of this movement back into wholeness that I think is really on the agenda now collectively.
Yeah, I think when that masculine principle and feminine principle merge as one, there's a whole bunch of other separation programs that automatically drop away as well. When we want to do something and we plan to do it, we set it, and then we spend, the next half an hour doubting ourselves. Why did I do that? I shouldn't be doing this. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. Who's going to be interested? All of those programs disappear when the masculine and feminine principles come in together as well, because there's no longer an internal battle.
Yeah.
So, I think that's why it's so much easier to step into flow or letting go or the unknown. And in that place of the unknown is aligning with pure source energy just automatically. So when we're aligned with that pure source, crystal Christ energy, we just remember our abundance. We remember our decadence and opulence, simplicity. It's all of this just part and parcel of our own codes of oneness, of non-separation.
Yeah, it feels very rich to me. So how has that showed up in your life in this week? What were the programs you noticed just falling out as your masculine and feminine really came together?
All right, here's one example, and it's a pretty crappy one, but it's just one small example. Last week, the week before, when we first discussed doing this, last Thursday, I was like, God, oh my God, oh, maybe I need a glass of wine. I'm like, no, don't have a glass of wine. You don't have a glass of wine. Anything could come out of your mouth then. This week, yesterday morning, I actually had this feeling. I walked out in the backyard and saw all the sunshine. I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to see David tomorrow night. I mean, that is just, I've done lives with Todd, as you know, many, many, many times, and I've always been sick to the stomach about it, really nervous. For me to wake up in the morning and say, oh, I can't wait till tomorrow night, that's a miraculous shift in me. Where is my fear gone of being in front of camera, or fearful about being nervous and I'll talk too fast and silly things blurt out of it? It just wasn't there. So it seems very small, but that's miraculous for me.
Yeah, that's
There's just
pretty
one.
major. It's pretty major. That's not a small thing at all to get over, a version of stage fright, because everybody has some level of that. That's very cool.
But to go
It
from
showed.
stage fright last week into, oh, I can't wait for Thursday night this week is just massive. And that's happened. That's just one of the little things that's happened after the merging. There are other things, but that's the simplest example. I keep looking down at the questions. I don't think we've got any yet, but if there are, please feel free to. We don't know all the answers. We're actually working out we don't know anything.
Yeah, really. But if there is anybody listening on Facebook and you have a question or a comment or anything, just write it in. And Morgan is keeping an eye on the on that, and we'll see if we can. Well, if we can maybe shed some light or give a perspective anyway. That's it. As Morgan's saying, we don't claim to have all of the answers by any means. But often we do have a perspective. Or what I find, if somebody asks a question, I think, oh, I haven't got a clue about that, but the answer lands, or some version of an answer lands fairly quickly.
Somebody else in the audience has the answer for us, even better.
Yeah. This week has been really intense for me in a lot of ways. Starting this last week, and also then starting my first small group last night, I've got very used to the life I had of running teleconferences on a Sunday, writing newsletters, doing in-person work. And it was like I recognized just the other day, oh, you're really having to step up to another level. And the energy has got much, much more focused. And this happened to me on was it Sunday's teleconference? I think, where the energy before we started, I was meditating and the energy was lovely and soft and just coming in like a cloud. And as I prepared to turn my camera on and start, the energy just went vertical and became very, very clear and focused and sharp. And it was like, oh, and I'd never felt that before in such a profound way. But I think that's happening in all of our lives now, that we're being asked to really step into a much more exacting flow of energy then, and a much more precise flow of energy. It's asking more of us now. And it's like, it's no longer time for messing around, it's just like, step into this, allow a lot of the other stuff to fall away, because you know this stuff now, you've lived it, or you've been practicing it for many, many years. Now is really the time to step onto the plate and come into alignment. And I think that's what it's all about, coming into alignment, to really allow the energy to flow smoothly and cleanly, because wherever it isn't is showing up in my life really quite quickly now. Wherever I've got a little knot or a thorn or something I'm not quite willing to look at, it's just coming and hitting me in the face very, very quickly. So there's no escape now, and the energy has increased in frequency or amplitude, or it's just become much, much more present. We're being asked to be much more present, I think, now, and not let things slip by, that we would let ourselves off the hook for. Now it's like, no, you have to nail that, you have to pay attention to it. So that's been my experience. And particularly, do these two experiences, the small group and this, are both about stepping more into the flow and coming into a stronger, clearer alignment for me, because I, in a similar way to you, have always wanted to be a bit more retiring, not too much upfront, as it were. So this, it's not that it's tricky, but it requires a different level of willingness. You might be able to hear my dog. He's sniffing around because he's in a bit of a strange house. So he's just wandering around bored because he has not had a proper walk yet.
I thought it was your stomach.
No, it's Rafi. Where is he? Come here, Rafi. Come and say hello. There's Rafi. He's my border terrier.
He looks like he needs a shave, David. Does he need a shave?
No, that was probably a bad angle, but he's a lovely dog. Something I wanted to talk about, because this has come up a few times in the past week, where I've seen people posting about solar storms and Schumann resonance and being completely thrown off whack by those sorts of things. And years ago, when I didn't really know anything about the Schumann resonance, so it was just, I think, starting to come into collective awareness in a bigger way. And I was hanging out with and working with two two ladies, and they were dowsing the Schumann resonance, and it was going up, and we're going to be really challenged by this. And in my meditations, the earth would just say to me, don't worry about the Schumann resonance, just anchor yourself deep in my core and receive direct from there, and that stabilizes you. And so I did, and I've never really been impacted. You can feel the shifting and the intensity, but because there's a deeper level of stabilization and you're being fed direct from the core of the earth, it gives a different sort of strength, I think. And it's the same with the sun, with the solar storms. If you focus into the heart of the sun and receive, go there, anchor yourself there and receive direct from the sun. So these are two really powerful sources of extraordinary energy that deeply sustains us. If you anchor there, the energy of a solar storm, you're already operating in a sense with more strength than the solar storm. So the energy of the solar storm doesn't knock you off balance in quite the same way. And I think people often what's the words I'm looking for? They might intend to do that as a connection and don't quite get there. So you just have to push with your will a bit into these places, and you'll find the earth really opens up to receive you and anchors your connection and then floods you with this strength. And it's the same with the sun. And I think often people are a little bit frightened about connecting with the heart of the sun just because of it's the sun, but it's an extraordinary benevolent, benign being who has our interests at heart. And so this simple connection is a really effective way to balance yourself when the Schumann resonance or solar storms are off the charts, and you, particularly if you're sensitive to those sorts of fluctuations, because it modulates your energy, and so you're not as prone to fluctuation because you're stabilized from deeper places, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wish you'd told me that about 3 months ago. I've been like a bloody schizophrenic, bipolar, like all of it for the last 3 months. I haven't really, I mean, I have had those moments. Yeah, that would have been handy to know a few months back, David.
I didn't realize you were challenged by those energies, but it's and I think it's also important to, if you're doing your upward and downward alignment, to make sure you go deeper than the human imprint in the earth, because otherwise you could just draw up human history and go further out than the energy field of the planet, because the same thing, you can just draw in literally. So it's like you have to, and you only have to do it a few times, really intend to anchor out in the cosmos and be with that anchoring, be with that, be present to that. And then your system knows what it's doing and does that. And it's established, but we have to take real responsibility for guiding our energy field, for really being present and saying, this is what we want. And not leaving it to chance, or not a bit half-hearted.
Like childbirth. I think women go through a lot more pain in the resistance to the pain. And if we just let go and become one with the flow of that, then something really, like, it neutralizes, probably with everything. And I think this is what's happened with this merging. It's like there's more just acceptance and flow and understanding the bigger picture. I love that. It's almost like you're merging with the event that's happening. You're intentionally merging and becoming one with it.
You
So
are, in effect. And it's another way
uh,
of merging your masculine and feminine, because that's the earth and the sun are the masculine and feminine principles. So these are huge sources of energy that join in you and meet in you and stabilize. And then you're not you're not feeling nearly as much of a victim to outside forces, because they're not outside forces, they're internal forces, and they're with you, strengthening you from the inside out. It's very simple, but actually all of those simple things are really profound. But it can make a major difference if you feel completely knocked for six by those energies. I don't know anything about childbirth. I'd have witnessed childbirth. I've been present, but I have had that experience of, I dropped a paving slab on my finger once, a really heavy paving slab, and the pain was just, quite extraordinary. And I could feel that I was moving out of my body very quickly. And before I knew it, the man we think of as Jesus was right there by my side. And he just said, look at me and breathe and stay there. And I knew that he was showing me what he had done, how he had dealt with pain. And so I did that. And as I stayed present in my arm, it shifted very quickly from pain to very strong sensation. And I could feel it rippling up my arm. And it moved, it hit my heart with a force that literally took layers of defense out of my heart. So it made me vulnerable. And I was almost in a state of shock, just because I had never, my immediate reaction was to escape my body, to leave my body and not be present to the pain. And staying there, having him standing in front of me saying, look at me and breathe and stay with it, was, it was an experience that lasted seconds, but it seemed to last a lifetime, So I do know, and I've practiced that thing of just riding pain as sensation rather than giving into it or being frightened from it. And you can, well, it can make a huge difference. And I've read that women can surf childbirth in that way.
Yeah.
It's not for me to comment so much.
With both of my children that I wanted easy births. The first one came in an hour and 10 minutes, and the next one came in 1 hour in the car. So we can actually do anything.
Amazing,
Birdie told me a secret about you that I'd like to ask about.
Go on. I don't have many secrets.
I heard a rumor that when you were younger, you were quite a wild man, lived a really big, wild life. And, how did you shift from that into who you are now? Like, what did you do?
It wasn't a big, wild life. It was a small, sad, addicted life that I thought was quite glamorous, but looking back, it wasn't really. I was just addicted to, my primary addiction was actually sex. And in order to get a lot of sex, I used alcohol and drugs. And so they all went hand in hand and created a very messy cocktail. And I was
Can I interrupt? Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
How did you become addicted to sex?
Well, I was sexually abused. So I was raped as a very young child. And I came to understand afterwards, a long time when I was in the healing process of that, that because so I had this hyper awareness of sex, and I knew that I was different than other 5-year-olds, that I knew stuff that they didn't, and I wanted stuff. I think what happened was the man that raped me, an extended family member, not immediate family, extended family. I think there was a level of possession with him, and some of that energy came into me. So I felt that I was run as a child by adult sexual energy. So I had all of this weird knowing and these cravings for sex in a body that shouldn't really have, in a very young 5-year-old body. And it was it was strange, you know, and it isolated me in a sense. And I built a personality that covered all of that sort of stuff up. So I felt I was always addicted to sex. I knew I was gay. And when I got to London at the age of 19, it was like a child let loose in a sweet factory, basically. I mean, I went a bit mad, you know, and that was all I wanted, was to be high and having sex. And so I spent a lot of time pursuing that. And it wasn't glamorous. I mean, God knows how I survived, to be honest, and I almost didn't. But this stuff was also working because I was a very multidimensional child, and this stuff was also working in the background. So I started hearing the voice that I'd heard as a child, and it led me to a place called the College of Psychic Studies, and I started looking at the stuff there, and I had some very natural ability that was focused and trained, but I was a mess. I wasn't doing any inner work, and I had become HIV positive at this stage and wasn't taking care of myself at all. So I had this high level, what felt like high level guidance going on, and awareness, and also this very, very low level, sleazy, messy life going on too. And I knew that I couldn't do it both. I couldn't do both, but I was unwilling to give up my addictions, and so I was torn in two by that. It was a very deep process of being literally ripped apart by my unwillingness to surrender, basically. And I stopped with alcohol and drugs at the end of 1999. I wanted to start the new millennium clean. And then a year later, I was diagnosed with liver cancer, and that process was extreme. It was very, very beautiful, but I wasn't expected to survive, and I had to make a choice about, did I want to live or did I want to die? The doctor said, you've got months to live, nothing more we can do. And guidance was saying to me, look, it's your life. Do what you want. You've always lived as if you wanted to die. You're about to get that choice met. Is it actually what you want? And it was a really stark sort of a stark state to be in. I was confronted with my own resistance and my own reluctance to be here, and my own anger. And I chose to live. The cancer was gone a month later. And I think literally the choice to live meant that I was no longer pushing life force out of my body. I was allowing life force to flow through me simply by stepping into the current of life in a way that I had been avoiding. And that more life force flowing through me changed the cancer. So I didn't do anything in terms of other than say yes to life. I didn't change my diet. I didn't do any detox or fasting or nothing. It was just say yes to life, and that changed everything. So, and then the healing work began. It was really hard slog of sorting through the mess I had made of my life and all the pain I had been avoiding with my addictions, really, and I felt completely broken, and I thought, oh, I've cured myself of liver cancer. That's amazing. It would all be sort of hunky dory, and it wasn't. It was like it was literally starting from scratch and realizing how empty and destroyed I was. Really, I was literally starting from the bottom and putting myself back together again. So. And I wouldn't change a thing, it was remarkable.
So next question, how do you feel about that man, that external family member that raped you now? Like, is this person still alive? Do you still see them?
And he
How do you
died
feel
when
about it?
he died when I was 15, and it's all of the healing work I did. And there was one time where I went back to the house where it happened. He was my grandmother's brother. And my mother would take me up to my grandmother's to get me out of the way when things were really rough at home. She would just drop me off there for a few days, or they would go away on holiday and leave me there. I was the youngest child. And so I was just left in that space, and all sorts of stuff happened. And I thought all the adults knew and that I was being punished, but nobody would tell me what I was being punished for, and I thought that was, so it was a very isolating, I felt deeply betrayed by my mother, all of that sort of stuff. With him, as I worked more and more deeply into the healing process, there was one time where I fell through layers of past lives of him and me entwined, and I knew we had had relationships for many lifetimes. I'm not in any way excusing his behavior, but I knew there was love there in a weird way, and that was, you shouldn't do that to a very young child's body, and whatever distortions had happened to him, I knew he had also been abused, he had also been raped. I knew that. I also knew that there was an implant that came in when he was raping me that meant, as I was going through the healing process, that I recognized that I was attached to a reptilian race who were siphoning off sexual energy. And what's the word for that? What's it called?
Nephilim?
Loosh. No, loosh.
Loosh.
So my addictive process was being used to fund, other races, and I think that's what happens. We look at things from just a one-dimensional perspective, but there are all of these other dimensions at work and all of these different layers of stories, and it's quite mind-boggling, really. So that was another element of it. And then when I had dealt and disconnected from the reptilian siphoning energy, when I would go to a gay club, and often the clubs I would go to would be sex on the premises clubs, alcohol, all of that sort of stuff. But you could feel that energy. I mean, it was sort of running the show in a sense,
As in like an open room or something, do you mean? Like you just go
Well,
there
there would
instead of
be
dancing?
areas. There would be areas in about, you would be drinking, dancing, but there would also be rooms where you could go and have sex with people, and that happens in the heterosexual world too. But I think the gay scene really took that sexual exploration and experimentation to extremes, and it still goes on. And I'm very lucky that the drugs that are the party and sex drugs that are doing the rounds now weren't available when I was an active addict, because I wouldn't have survived.
Do you think as an adult man in those places that there was like periods or times or certain people that you picked to reenact those early childhood experiences out, to relive them, to to repeat the cycles, I guess?
I
And I
think
just want to
you
say
are
this
repeating. Go on.
before you answer. When a child is raped by an adult, the adult tells the child, you mustn't tell anyone. Always. You've been groomed most of the time. And so the child picks up that shame. Now, if the child can't go home and tell a parent, then that shame, the heaviness of that shame gets locked in the child as well. And we end up, in self-hatred with those things. And I find that, later on in life, you are looking for ways to repeat that history.
Yeah. And that was it. I was full of self-hatred. There was no regard for myself. So it didn't matter if I had sex with 5 or 6 people in a night. There was so little self-respect. And I thought I was enjoying that at the time. I was. And in a weird way, the drugs I was using, and I think, to be honest, the primary drug for addiction that we have is adrenaline, and most of us become addicted to adrenaline by an adrenalized mother when we're in the womb. So if our mother is having a stressful time, and my mother was in a violent relationship with my father, I was flooded with adrenaline, which is a very addictive substance, when I was in the womb. So I think you come out addicted, and you're seeking, you seek a lifestyle that allows you to keep our own internal pharmaceuticals flowing, you know. So you take away the drugs and all of the other stuff, and you're still left with your own anxiety that wants to keep the adrenaline going. And that's when the real recovery work starts, I think, when you start to unwind those very, very tight states that are locked in, and you start to repattern your own pharmacology, in a sense, your own adrenals and cortisol and all of that. And you know, meditation is amazing, but a lot of addicts really can't sit with meditation because it's too frightening. It's too, you know, so it can take a while. For me, meditation was always very, very easy. I could drop into an altered state, you know, very, very quickly. So but drugs kept me on the planet because they were my anesthetic until such a time as I was ready to do the work of healing and recovery, you know.
And what about pain? So as a child, when you're raped by an adult, obviously it can be a very painful but also sexual experience.
Mm-hmm.
So as an adult man, were you needing to bring in that pain? Like, did you need to be hurt again? That's and you don't have to answer that. That's a very private question, but
I didn't. And I always knew, and it was funny, my psychic development teacher, I would go to her for readings. And it was one reading, she said, "Oh, this is very interesting." She said, "I don't quite know how to put this, but there's something going to be offered to you in the next few days. And all I'm going to say is that you must say no. If you don't say no and you go and you start to explore this avenue, you'll be totally lost." And 2 days later, I was asked by somebody that was really, really attractive to start exploring S&M, you know, sadomasochistic sex. And a part of me was tempted, but I knew that I'd had this warning from spirit, in effect, that if I went down there, I would die. And I did know that. I knew that I would open up to a world of darkness in me, and I would meet a world of darkness externally, and I wouldn't survive. And so I knew that I had to steer clear of that. And so
I'm trying to understand. I think I'm trying to understand if is pain associated with sexual addiction. Do we use sexual addiction to repress pain or to enact pain? Is there some sort of marriage between those two things?
I think the acting out
associated with pain.
I think the acting out, you're circling the wound all the time without ever quite going into the wound to do the work to clear it. So you're circling the wound, and often you're making the wound bigger. And a lot of people that are into S&M would say, "Oh, it's a deeply healing, it's very much about trust," and all. And it can be. I think it certainly can be, if there is, you know, but it's a very fine line. Then you can do that work of catharsis, or you can just make it much, much, much worse. And you know, a lot of people in that scene aren't employing any awareness. I didn't expect to get into this conversation this morning, I have to admit.
No, I'm sorry. It just flowed, didn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I just want to ask one more question around this, and then Gail's got a question for you. But so the first perpetrator question I asked was, how do you feel about him? Do you have unconditional love for this man? Like, have you completely neutralized that first initial experience?
It was interesting because I went back to his grave. I went to the house and I felt nothing at the house. And I looked in the garden and I looked across the valley and I saw the graveyard, and I knew my grandmother was in that grave and I knew he was. And so I went to the graveyard. I drove across the valley and I walked into the graveyard from behind. So at the back, so all the graves were facing the other way, and I knew exactly which was his grave. I'd never seen it, but it sort of glowed, and I went to that grave and I sat on the grave and I said, okay, I want to clear this from my system completely, and and I didn't know where these words came from, but from my ancestral line. And this column of light flowed through me into the grave, lit up his body, and then flowed out into the whole of the graveyard. And I watched and thought, why is that happening? Why is that? I went off to my aunt who lived fairly close, my mother's sister, and I said, oh, I visited Gran and Uncle Wilfred's graves. And she said, oh, you were related to half of the bodies in that graveyard, the way the interbreeding and the marriages and stuff worked in that village. You were related to half. And I just understood that that pattern was probably a deep pattern in that little isolated village in that town. And that was a really significant thing for me to recognize that. And over the years, I can't say I feel unconditional love for him. I feel sort of neutrality. I don't have a charge about it. And I have worked with unconditional love and holding him in my open heart and all of that sort of stuff. And I don't need to do that anymore, but there's just a level of neutrality for me now. So.
Very cool. Let's ask Gail's question, because she asked ages ago. She wants to know, were you spiritual as a young child? I think we
I
sort
don't know
of covered this.
spiritual. I think I was aware as a child, and I would have lots and lots of powerful experiences that I couldn't explain, and I knew that I didn't need to talk to the adults about them. And I was always into. My father was a doctor and had lots of books on alternative healing, oddly enough, and so I would read those and read the Erich von Daniken books, Chariots of the Gods, and all of that sort of stuff. And I loved all of that. And I was literally away with the fairies. You know, I was sitting in the bottom of the garden talking to fairies. And one of the things that was lovely with my with the abuse, and I think this is often what happens, it's one of the, you know, when you look at things from a multidimensional perspective, there was a time when I was led by my uncle into a room to meet some of his friends who were into the same thing. And as I walked into the room, all I saw behind them was a white unicorn, a huge white unicorn. And I left my body and went out of body with the unicorn. So I wasn't present to experience what happened, which no doubt was ghastly, and I don't have those memories, and I don't need to have those memories. Years later, as the memories were waiting to come back, or the awareness, I started seeing a unicorn every time I would meditate. There'd be this unicorn up here when I would meditate, and I was annoyed because it was like, well, if I wanted a power animal, I wanted a lion or a wolf or a bear. Didn't want a sparkling unicorn, and that's what this was. And then when there was an explosion of memory, of awareness of what had happened, a few hours later, the unicorn trotted into my heart with the 3-year-old me on his back. And that was such a significant healing, because all of my life I had had this gaping, empty wound where I was missing, and that healed that. It was extraordinary. So multidimensional doorways that often would be closed by the natural process of growing up in Western society, I think were kept more open for me. And I think, you know, people who have been abused or experienced trauma often report that, you know, that was a purpose. It kept doorways open for me. That yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think there are a lot more men that this has happened to than any of us even can comprehend at the moment? Like, men don't really tend to talk about this a lot, do they?
And you know what was amazing is the power of suppression. How I knew something had happened, but I kept it I kept a lid on it. I kept it out of my conscious awareness. Now that requires a lot of energy and a lot of effort, but I think, and it's the same thing. You hear Graham Hancock talking about this collective amnesia, that the trauma of Atlantis was so painful that we have suppressed it. It's the same thing that we do as individuals for trauma, that we have this amazing ability to keep it out of consciousness, and we do it as a group as well. You know, it's not just an individual thing. That's a collective pattern too. And I think, you know, in a lot of ways, the work we do of recovering our traumatized self starts to open these multidimensional doorways for the collective too, to allow much bigger versions of reality to come back in. So I think it's all quite magical, you know. I didn't think that 20 years ago when I was dealing with this. You know, I wished when this stuff was coming up that I had chosen to die, and I understood that's what I was avoiding. This is the stuff that I was drinking and drugging on. And I wish there were days when I wished that I had chosen to die rather than chosen to live. Now it's a different story. And understand that everything you've ever been through becomes a vehicle for consciousness. And empathy always seems like a loaded term, but I know I can stand with somebody or hold somebody's hand or just hold their energy field, and it doesn't matter what they've been through or what they've experienced, what's happened to them, what they've lived, what they've done. It's like, no matter how dark we think life is or we are, there is always redemption. They're just stories, and the truth of what we are is something much bigger. And it can seem a long way away, but it's always there waiting to emerge, and it's very beautiful. You know, it's really lovely. Sorry, I've talked a lot, and this isn't you interviewing me, it's us chatting. So I feel like
We're
I've
chatting.
taken
We are chatting, and I mean, there's obviously a
chatting.
reason this has popped up. You know, I think I asked you about, you know, how did you turn from this wild young man into this really balanced, respectful, incredible older man? So it all organically went there. But I think it's, you know, it's very important. You just allow these things to flow. Let's change it up. Let me ask one more question.
Mhm.
What is the most phenomenal, paranormal, freaky, miraculous experience that you've ever had?
I don't know, to be honest, because I don't have big power. You know, they all seem quite quiet to me. Like that thing of
Mm.
Jesus standing in front of me saying, "Look at me and breathe with me." That was that's an amazing experience. But it was so matter of fact and without fanfare, and it's just like, oh, he was there in an instant saying, you know, breathe with me. And it's like, oh, so that's an extraordinary experience. But none of them seem to have a lot of fanfare. They're just, and I think that's how it's meant to be, in a sense. You know, it's not. I would love to have me and my friend, whose house I'm in now, went off to a dark part of the seafront. I live in a town, but we're on the coast. It's a lovely town beach here. We wandered up the coast to get away from the lights because we wanted to stand on the seafront, gazing into the night sky, asking for contact with our star family. And I would love nothing more than a spaceship to come and land on the beach, you know. But I'm always reminded, well, you are the beings you're looking for, but I still would like, you know, a materialization. We both had beautiful experiences with the stars, but not directly with our star family. But so I don't have huge experiences in that way, you know, big fanfare. They're all amazing in their own way, but quite low key to me. I mean, I've seen angels walk into a room and Mary walk into a room and Isis walk into a room and join in healing sessions I'm doing. And that's quite gobsmacking, but you're in that altered state and it's like, oh, hi. And they carry on and do the work. And it's like, you know, and part of me is thinking, wow, that's really quite amazing. But it's happening in such a matter-of-fact way, you know. So it's great.
Big experience. Obviously, you're used to it, but you just brought up having a spaceship landing on the beach. I've had that experience. I've
You know,
been
that
there.
wild.
I've had it. Yeah, I was. Todd and I we were living in Kauai.
Hold this, because I've got to run upstairs for just 30 seconds. Hold this and I'll be with you in just a second, yeah? Talk amongst
Oh,
yourselves.
30 seconds.
Huh?
What am I going to do by myself here for 30 seconds?
Read some Facebook messages, huh?
Okay, hurry up. Right. Let's have a look. So we've got some messages here. Yeah, wasn't he fabulous, Julie? Yeah, really. I mean, you could just listen to him all night. And I'm not dancing, Kirsty. I'm not dancing. That's not a good look. Talk, Morgan. Hi, Gail. I think it's fascinating to be curious about other people and just let them talk and just, go down these rabbit holes and like, how much has he taught us tonight? Just by listening to his part of his story. Julie says, Morgan, I feel your great questions are coming from personal experience. This is very powerful, raw, and open of you both to discuss this, and it will help so many who have quietly gone through similar experience in the past. Yeah, I did go through it, and like David, I've completely neutralized that now, and it's possible. It's absolutely possible to transform any energy. Once we start working below the stories or above the stories and we understand everything's energy either at a higher vibration or lower vibration, we just use our imagination to transform it. Hello, Morgan. Want you to talk. Oh, you want me to talk? I'm talking, Gail. Just till David gets back. Here he is. That was a
Sorry about
quick
that.
wee. Did you see?
I had to.
Thank you for being very fast. I managed to fill in 30 seconds of talking. Yes.
Marvelous. No, tell us about your spaceship. Would love to.
So Todd and I were in Kauai and we used to go out walking every night and we were on this raised land and we could see the beach just down there past us. So we used to walk every night, like up this gravel dirt road. And one night we were walking up and it's pitch black dark and I saw greys in the bushes. I saw greys and I just said to Todd, I'm going. And I ran home. I was so scared. I just ran as fast as I could in the dark home. I didn't say anything. Todd got back, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes later because he stood there staring at the spaceship. I couldn't talk. I was in so much shock. I just couldn't talk. When we both woke up the next morning, we both we'd obviously settled through the night and we both said, did you see what I saw last night? We saw the identical thing. I saw the lights of the spaceship, but I had my hands over my eyes trying to run and not fall at the same time. It was one of those things. I think there's a famous painting where they've got a tribe on the beach looking out to the ocean and there's all these ships and none of the tribe members could see them. It reminded me of that. So
Yeah.
my mind needed to grasp that, through the night and integrate that, to be able to picture what we had seen. But we saw these two, probably about 3-foot greys in the bushes, scared of us, terrified of us. And well, he says he wasn't scared, but he couldn't talk about it that night either. But yeah, pretty much like a big spaceship landed in the paddock next door to us, and these greys were walking around. So I don't think we went walking at night for a few weeks after that.
That's wild, isn't it? And would
Yeah,
that be your most out
no,
there?
No,
Tell us that then, if you
one
want.
of them. All right, about 15 years ago, maybe no, 20. Let's see, my son is 21. He would have been 6 or 7 years old. I was a fan. I am a fan of laying out in the backyard naked, making sure it's like a raw chicken or a roasted chicken. I like to look like a roasted chicken. Um, and I was laying out, and I'm on my back, and I'm open my eyes, and there's this massive, at the height of a helicopter and the size of a helicopter, ball bearing floating in the sky above me.
And why do you say a ball bearing then? That's what it looked like, yeah?
Silver ball. It was just a massive, big silver ball the size of a helicopter floating above me in the sky. And I've got and ran inside and spent the whole day not looking. And there's actually pictures of ball bearing UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've had when we went to Utah, I used to inside. Oh, there's a mountain there. It's just behind Area 52.
Yeah.
Right. So we're living just behind that area. And every night at exactly the same time, every night they'd start telling me we're not exactly close, between 8 and 9 o'clock. They'd tell me when they were coming, and I was able to say to everyone in the house, "Oh, they're coming, they're coming." And we'd all go out there with our beach chairs and sit and watch all these UFOs flying around us.
That's amazing, isn't it? See, and I always think I'm probably not going to get those sorts of experiences. I don't know, but I would love. I mean, I have seen a spaceship once, and I had a spaceship. I had a spaceship dock into my body. That I think was probably the most phenomenal experience. Then was that.
Doc, did you say Doc?
Yeah, I'd had a healing
Doc.
session. Yeah, and I knew the healing session wasn't finished, so I sat there, and this spaceship just came into my body, and it was a disc, a saucer, a huge disc, and it just came right into my body and moved through and settled. And the heart field was the control station, and my energy field became the size of London. It just became vast, and that integrated over a few days. And then there was one time when in all of the rooms around the spaceship, I could see it was like there was a member of every different race in the galaxy in that spaceship. And I thought, oh, well, that must be a DNA encoding that we are we're everything. And that changed everything. That was in 2015, and 3 months later, out of nowhere, I had a healing practice and was running teleconferences, and that happened overnight, sort of thing. So I know it was preparation for that, So yeah. So I think these are the and I'm realizing that my main teaching of life is that the inner and outer are one and the same. There is no difference, and that is another version of the masculine feminine. That there's no separation. The inner and outer are exactly the same, and yeah, it's the end. It's the end of separation, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you think for 11:11? I dropped off your call the other day at 11:11, and that made me laugh. My internet bumped me off.
You were about to share and we lost you, and I think you were saying, there was a mother that you from the Victorian age or something, and I think you were about to say, and the new mother that came in, I think you were about to say was galactic. Is that where you were
What
going
I
with
was
that?
experiencing, because you were inviting us to experience, and I think you're going to do this in a meditation a little bit, yeah, but the masculine feminine. And there had been this old image of a feminine, which was a bride, but she was a Victorian bride, dressed, and she looked like a ghost, really. And I thought, well, that can't be it. And then that fell apart. And all I experienced was, and I've had a lot of these experiences lately, of feeling held in the embrace of the galaxy. So the galactic mother is how I think of it. That holds everything. And of course, it's at a scale that is, vast, vast, vast beyond comprehension, millions and millions and millions of light years. But that is what revealed itself as the feminine. Yeah. And then I was bumped from your call at 11:11 by my internet. So what are you thinking for the 11:11?
Okay, so this is the intel that I've got, is that in this period we are actually integrating our masculine and feminine, if not fully merging that. There's so much that comes with that. I felt a massive, it's like I got my own satellite. My crown chakra blew up so much. So the coding came through on the 7th. We're embodying it in ourselves around the 9th, give or take a day or two. And by the 11th, it's
Today
going.
is the night, yeah?
Today's the night. Today's 9/11, miracle day. By the 11th, so we've anchored embodied that in ourselves, and by the 11th, there'll be enough around the planet, like 100 monkey effect, that this coding gets anchored around the planet. The one thing I haven't mentioned about this coding is when the masculine and the feminine merge within self, you've now got these two no longer in battle, but understanding how to have reverence for each other and respect and trust and understanding and compassion and truth. And it's not just love anymore. So we're actually all of us that are doing this are actually going to spend the next 3 months, or no, probably up to December 21st, creating, rescripting new code of sacred union.
And I think there's something profound that you mentioned, the end of the battle of the sexes, in effect, isn't it? The end of that particular war, which has been a war that's gone on seemingly for many thousands of years. I think as more and more of us find that place of inner union and our own internal battle of the sexes ceases, this will have an impact on peace around the planet. I think that's how it happens, isn't it? It has to be an internal thing before we experience it.
Going to change everything. When you've got all these people walking around, 100 monkeys, however many there are, it doesn't even matter. There's going to be enough that it becomes the greater frequency of love on the planet. Now, the other part that I've got too about that is that, we've all been feeling this mother goddess energy, getting a bit louder and a bit louder and a little bit louder. She wasn't ever going to be able to fully present herself until the masculine was there with her. So what we're observing and we're going to start observing is the women are coming out with a divine masculine with them, or they're coming out knowing that they've got their own divine masculine with them. So it's not just the coding of divine union, but it's all these people around the planet are carrying the energy of understanding the true nature of Mother Goddess and Father God working as one. They're going to arrive together.
Isn't that gorgeous, Sam? Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I've been experiencing it in the nature realms, then, with much stronger meetings with the masculine aspect of nature that we know as the god Pan, who was turned into the devil by the Christian church, and the whole natural realm and our deep connectedness with the world of nature for healing, for communion with the nature spirits, all of that stuff was really deeply suppressed. And this is a timeline that I'm seeing emerging again, and it's been referred to me as a golden timeline. And it ties in very much with this golden, this river of gold inside. It's all part of the same thing, that we emerge, or we live on this planet, and we emerge from places of extraordinary richness and abundance. And we have crammed ourselves into spaces of lack and need and desperation, and we're just coming back into the recognition of how things could and should be on this planet. And so I've had extraordinary experiences with Pan and the nature spirits lately, just signaling that they're shifting the balance again. And I think a lot more people are becoming aware of nature as a living force rather than, oh, something we need to protect, something we can protect because it makes us money. It's actually, we need to take care of nature because it's what we are, you know, and our body is nature. So I think that is going to be something that really comes online very beautifully in the coming months, you know. And I think this 11/11 is a big part of that, of the gateway for that.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or any comments or anything from anybody on Facebook?
Yes, I think we've got one more. Okay, do you think people who are abused in childhood then often go on to become seekers of spirituality and psychic abilities? The experiences take them out of their body, or those abilities are naturally innate from birth, and certain characters and darkness are drawn to such innocent, pure souls of children, kind of like it is the chicken or the egg? I've got one comment about that. There is this incredible gift that comes from that childhood trauma. And it's not seen as a gift, you know, from our peers or schools or adults or whatever, but the shock of those things that happen create dissociation. And so there's this organic thing that happens. It's too hard to be here on the 3D planet. We learn to go off with the fairies in the garden. And that's where we learned these fantastic skills of, you know, visiting other dimensions. You know, if we're at school, we got, you know, kicked out of class for being disruptive or, you know, not present and all that sort of
Daydream.
stuff. But
I was always daydreaming.
daydreaming. But this was created by the shock of some of those childhood traumas that taught us to dissociate. It wasn't very helpful through our childhood and teenage years. But as adults, you know, it's no longer dissociation. It's we know just how to flip, you know, between different dimensions, you know, to go and gather information from other places. So that is one of the brilliant gifts that come from that childhood shock. That's my
Totally.
opinion.
It's like I said, it kept doorways open for me that would otherwise have been closed by a regular childhood, I think, because I was out of my body and I was being cared for in a realm of unicorns that brought me back in, you know, when I was ready to do the work of integration. And that is amazing, I think, you know, absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And that the compassion of that just blew my mind away, that, you know, that I was spared the experience by our multidimensionality, in a sense. But I think we all have these abilities. I don't think it's a special few, you know. I think it comes as part and parcel of because the questioner was asking about that. And I think it's, you know, multi-sensory, multi-dimensional abilities are part and parcel of being human. It's just some of us have them a little bit more dialed up because we're going to be using them in this lifetime. Some aren't going to be using them in this lifetime. And so they're not up on the surface particularly. And maybe in 2 lifetimes they will be, but I think they're all there in potential for everybody.
Yeah. And another thing too, I think because we spent so much time daydreaming and out of that, we weren't getting as brainwashed into the 3D systems as deeply as, you know, the children that were brainwashed into being 100% present and make sure you learn, you know, all of this. We were out here learning. So
I couldn't
I don't know.
focus. I had no capacity to focus, you know,
Me either.
and so I could chat and talk, and I quite enjoyed school for the most part, but I didn't do any work. And I was told when I was 16, don't worry, the work you're here to do has nothing to do with schoolwork. And I said this to my mother, and she was like, just get back upstairs into your bedroom and do your homework. And I was like, an arrogant 16-year-old saying, no, it's going to be fine. I don't. And yet, it, I had a very messy, convoluted life until I was ready to start this, and that, but it's a life of very rich experience in a sense, so I don't begrudge it at all. Are you going to lead us out with a meditation then?
Yes, let's do just a
I
quick
think it's time,
meditation.
huh?
Just a
Lovely
quick
chatting with
meditation.
you as always. I said
Sorry,
lovely
David.
chatting with you. Lovely chatting with you as always. I
Yes.
hope it's
Wonderful.
I hope it's useful for somebody.
Yeah, yeah, well, what's yes, becoming one with the earth, and all it is, the wisdom, the knowledge. Thank you both so much. Oh, that's just from Valerie. I thought there was a question there. Thank you, Valerie. Um, okay, so if you feel like it, if you don't, just leave or watch or whatever. And if you like it and want to stay in it, switch us off at the end and stay in the space that we're going to go into and explore a little bit more. But yeah, just get comfortable and close your eyes and take a few deep breaths. And when you're ready, inviting your own light body to move out and come before you, and just taking note, is that light body a feminine energy or a masculine energy? And inviting now the essence of the polar opposite gender. So if you brought a feminine up, inviting now the masculine or vice versa. And just allowing both of those to be together for a little bit, tuning in to each one of them. And just setting the intention and or letting them know that you are setting the intention or would like to invite the two of those parts to actually merge as one at some point when they're comfortable. Might not always happen immediately. There might be some details to work out or some battles or programs going on there, but setting your intention that you would like your masculine principle and your feminine principle to move towards each other and eventually merge as one. And if there is any resistance or any blockages or limitations, simply inviting whatever's presenting to transmute back to pure love or be released out into the universe for recycling, out into your own torus field for recycling. Just allowing anything that's preventing the merging to move out of the way, basically. Just tuning in to any information that comes in. Have they merged, and what does that feel like? Or have they not merged, and what needs to happen so they can? Are there new colours or tones or sounds, new frequencies? And just setting the intention, because this is just a real mini guided meditation, that if they haven't merged, that they will continue to work together through the night until this is done. Or if they have merged, inviting them to come back into the field to where they belong, merged as one together now. And just setting our intention for any integration, emotional release, or whatever needs to be done with ease and grace, ideally through dream state. And now just taking a couple of deep breaths and returning fully into your own consciousness and your own body. And it is done. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. That's beautiful. Really beautiful. So, we're done, yeah?
Number 2.
Yeah, and we'll see you same time next week, 10 o'clock UK, 8 p.m. for you.
8 p.m. here, 9, it's very late, for the rest around Australia, about 9 o'clock for Sydney, Melbourne sort of time. But yeah, next week. Thank you.
Okay, lots of love, huh? Take care. See you soon.
You too. Okay, bye. Thank you, everyone.